Hello and welcome to Foreign Policy Focus. This is episode 28 and I am the show's host, Kyle. Again, everybody, thank you for sharing the show and subscribing to the show on iTunes. It does really help the show to grow and get out there to new listeners, so if everybody could keep on doing those kind of things for the show, that would be great. And now we'll get into the news. We're going to start with North Korea, South Korea, and the U.S. involvement there. Continuing escalation in rhetoric, at least in the rhetoric and tensions between the two countries, we have Mike Pence currently in South Korea. Pence is actually visiting the demilitarized zone today and made some statements while in South Korea. Pence said that he felt that the U.S. was done with its strategic listening to North Korea, and that from now on, that this isn't going to be happening anymore. While this statement isn't necessarily out of line with anything else that the Trump administration has said, or just more bolsterous, is just who's saying it. The Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, does carry some weight, and with him being in South Korea, I'm sure that holds some significance to the Japanese, North Koreans, and South Koreans. This really is turning into a huge hotbed over there. I think when Trump took office, myself and most people were kind of turned our attention to the Middle East because the campaign rhetoric was more with Trump wanting to knock the hell out of ISIS. And as far as leaders with big personalities go, you do have one in Trump and with Kim Jong-un in North Korea. And so I think there was some speculation that Trump was going to start getting along with leaders like Duterte in the Philippines and Putin in Russia and Erdogan in Turkey. And then, maybe Kim Jong-un could go along with that as goofy leaders with big personalities. So obviously that hasn't been what has happened since Trump took office. Pretty much immediately, I don't know exactly why or how this happened, but the Trump administration was really worried about North Korea and is really afraid that North Korea is going to have or carry out some kind of strike against the new U.S. I guess they, it's kind of depends on who you tout to if North Korea actually has the ability to strike the United States. Just looking at everything I've seen, I would think that the answer right now is North Korea probably would not have the ability to strike the United States. The U.S. proper of us as the United States right now with the technology they have, and certainly not with a nuclear weapon. There is some speculation as to even how many of the North Korean ballistic missiles will actually carry a nuclear weapon, because nuclear weapons are kind of big weapons and these missiles aren't that big. However, North Korea does seem to have nuclear weapons. This isn't a confirmed fact either. I mean, there is some debate. I guess all the explosions that were, nuclear tests, none of them ever measured from the sensors that, the U.S. and probably China and, other countries have access to. They didn't measure high enough that they would be nuclear weapons, but that doesn't seem to be very conclusive. And so I guess for whatever reason, the explosions were measured less, even if they were nuclear explosions, and maybe it was just the way the recordings were taken or something like that. But to just show the significance of this, we have, China moving a lot of soldiers onto their border with North Korea and Japan really pulling out of South Korea. And so if you do look at what North Korea would probably do to get back at the United States if the United States ever went through with an attack against North Korea but didn't necessarily disable the North Korean state, and that would be an attack against South Korea. And now if North Korea would be able to deliver nuclear bombs to these places, would North Korea actually kind of have to set up the explosion, take the nuclear bomb somewhere, set it up, and then detonate it that way? I'm not sure, but North Korea has an awful lot of rockets, and the capital of South Korea isn't very far from the border with North Korea, and I think that those civilians in Seoul would probably be pretty big targets of North Korean retaliation against the United States, and people in the region are really starting to take it seriously. The Trump administration really seems to be focused there, even more than Iran now. I know right after Trump took office, it seems like the bullseye was on Iran, but now it certainly seems to have shifted towards North Korea. There has been a lot of speculation that some of Trump's other actions across the Middle East have actually been more directed as messages towards Kim Jong-un in North Korea and not their actual targets. The two main these events was the Moab strike in Afghanistan and the strike against Assad in Syria. I think both of these these strikes were kind of so out of the what we expected to happen that we're looking for maybe alternative ways that would make the math kind of add up as to why Trump would have carried out these attacks. And one of those is that he's trying to shake or scare Kim Jong-un. I don't know if that will work. I don't know if that's likely. I think Kim Jong-un's thinking here would just be that this is why I'm developing or have nuclear weapons, is so that the U.S. doesn't do to me what the U.S. is currently doing to Assad. He's made comments that the mistakes that Gaddafi and Saddam made was certainly giving up their nuclear weapons, because once they did, then the U.S. went in and invaded. And so I do think that that's probably the position Kim Jong-un, and if that is Trump's strategy, I'm not saying it is, I'm just saying it's a possibility that's probably not working. There has been a lot of developments with the coal trade, and this is something that a lot of Trump supporters are kind of waving around as a victory for the United States and Donald Trump. What happened was that China buys a lot of coal from North Korea, apparently, and China shut down some of those shipments going to China and is instead buying U.S. coal. So, I think on that scale, just that, the U.S. is going to have, at least for the time being, some more coal exports, and that it's depriving the North Korean state of some financial assets. This is probably something that, if you're just an American first nationalist, you could say is a victory for the Trump administration. I don't know what the long-term effects are. I doubt it will be a very successful long-term move. At the end of the day, the reason, one of the reasons I'm sure China that supports the administration, Kim Jong-un in North Korea, is just because getting them financial help is going to help to feed the civilians there. There's a lot of people starving. If the North Korean state does start taking in less and less money, which it already has seen with international sanctions, I'm sure Kim Jong-un isn't going to go hungry for the night. I think it's going to be mostly the civilians that suffer from it. And so from just an international kind of foreign policy perspective, it's definitely not going to have the accomplishment that the U.S. wants. It'll just see a little bit more North Korean civilians suffer. And it could be an artificial boom to the coal industry, and it could create some more market distortions within the United States. And not to get too heavily into the economics, but you could see a situation where maybe China starts to buy U.S. coal for a couple years or a couple months. Maybe at the end of Trump's term, somebody else takes power and has a different position towards North Korea, and then China shifts back towards buying coal from North Korea. Or after a couple years, the U.S. just loses the leverage, that whatever leverage is putting on China now to not buy North Korean coal, and then North Korea decides to start selling their coal back to China, and then we see a pretty big drop in the U.S. coal market. And so these are always the risk, just in economics, whenever the government gets involved, is it could kind of set up artificial markets with its massive military, and then cause market distortions and just crashes and terrible outcomes like that. I think that's all I want to say on the North Korea front for today. I know that the Pentagon walked back the statements that NBC reported that the U.S. would strike North Korea if North Korea carried out a nuclear weapons test. North Korea did not carry out a nuclear weapons test. Apparently, over the weekend, they did attempt to carry out some kind of ballistic missile test, and it failed really bad. So this was a good thing that it failed. For whatever reason it happened, it made the North Korean regime look a little less scary to the U.S. people, and the people of South Korea. It made them look kind of incompetent and stupid. And so if that's what it takes to ratchet down tensions a little bit, and it does seem like tensions have been a little bit lower since that failed test, we may see some good things happening here. Moving on to Turkey, where they had a referendum vote. I mentioned the referendum vote in past shows, but I'm going to get into it a little bit more now. Following the coup on July 15th of 2016, in which it is alleged that a group of people known as the Gulenists, who follow a man named Gulen, who lives actually in exile from Turkey but in the United States in Pennsylvania, attempted a coup to overthrow Erdogan from power. Leading up to the coup, Erdogan had taken on a lot more power. Prior to Erdogan taking the role of president of Turkey, it had been more of a ceremonial position than a position of power. Not quite like, the Queen in England, but more similar to that than the power that the president has in the United States. However, Erdogan was a pretty popular figure. I think he served his term limits of prime minister, which is a position that held more power. But Turkey's military was always fairly independent, and the parliament was always pretty independent and held a lot of power, and the courts held a lot of power. However, like I said, it's alleged that this group attempts a coup in Turkey, and it falls flat on its face. I mean, within a few hours of the coup starting, it's already defeated. You had, this group driving tanks onto the streets, and I guess either there just wasn't enough support. Some have speculated that it was a false flag type incident orchestrated by Erdogan to gain more power, and certainly if that's what happened, the results you would expect to see from that have certainly worked out. But whatever happened on the night of July 15th, what has resulted was Erdogan immediately taking emergency powers from the parliament and being able to arrest people or dismiss people from jobs. I believe Erdogan has now dismissed over 110,000 people from their positions and has imprisoned 45,000 more. On a scale, this is a very tyrannical act and is something that very disturbing, and something that from a U.S. ally, Turkey is a NATO member state, and you had them literally rounding up people. Erdogan has imprisoned the leader of the Kurdish party that held not a significant portion of the parliament, but did have a number of members, and they weren't they weren't just having one member. It wasn't like an independent in the U.S. Senate or something where they hold no power. They were a group of people that did hold some power. And Erdogan really cleaned up the military, put all of his guys in charge. I guess it's to the point now where Erdogan has either arrested or dismissed so many people that the Turkish military is lacking a lot of generals, and Erdogan's forming his own type of police force. Actually, I guess a way to say that a little bit more clearly would be that a group of people kind of similar to, not kind of similar, but in the same fashion as what you have in other countries where a group of individual citizens will start to train themselves up, feeling that for whatever reason the government's going to either do something bad or they're going to need to help their government or stop their government, and this group believes they're going to need to help Erdogan retain power in Turkey. And so I guess this could be almost a substitute police force used by Erdogan if he ever felt the need to. We're also seeing Turkey having just a lack of teachers, especially at the college level, but also at the secondary education level, because Erdogan really went through and got rid of any teacher. I guess that wasn't even loyal to him, not necessarily loyal to opposition groups or anything like that. So we have this referendum. Leading up to the referendum, the polling doesn't look very good for Erdogan, actually. I think a lot of Turkish people, even of Sunni descent, were worried that Erdogan would take too much power with this move. And you had a lot of people in large cities opposing this. You had obviously people who supported the Kurds and the Kurds themselves all opposing this. And polling wasn't looking good, so Erdogan actually didn't permit polling to be published leading up to the elections. The elections were held on the 15th or the 16th, and the result was a 51-49 vote in favor of accepting the referendum. What this referendum does is it just gives Erdogan a whole lot more power. He could pretty much go to war unilaterally now. Has a lot more power over the courts. I believe he could pull justices at will and put new ones in place. He has power to either disband or I guess just ignore the parliament. So it is looking like Turkey went from a something of a constitutional republic democracy into what is now a dictatorship. Concerns for the U.S. Right now have to be, one, Turkey's membership in NATO. We had some very interesting conflicts between Erdogan and Obama, especially in his last 6 to 8 months in office. Obama didn't immediately come out and condemn the coup in Turkey, and that seemed to upset Erdogan. We had situations where, like I said, Gulen, the man who's the head of the organization that Erdogan at least believes is behind the coup, lives in the United States, and the United States has refused to extradite him to Turkey. So this has been something that has upset Erdogan quite a bit. We also have Erdogan having problems with other NATO and EU members like Greece, because I guess a lot of the generals after the coup fell apart fled to Greece, and some of them have and some of them have not been extradited back to Turkey. Either way, there's a divide between Turkey and the West, as we would traditionally see it, Europe and the United States. And we could see Erdogan move away from NATO and the EU. So we will see what happens moving forward. We also have Erdogan having troops in both Syria and Iraq, and that those troops are not necessarily there to fight ISIS or Al-Qaeda. I believe Erdogan's kind of stated mission in Syria is to remove Assad from power and also to beat up on the Kurds while he's there and push the Kurds west of the Euphrates River. In Iraq, it's less clear what his goal is, but he did make this a speech and put the troops into Iraq on a significant day in history that represents the old Ottoman Empire ruling Mosul. So it just interesting moves like that. Erdogan does have 500 troops in Iraq, and that really upsets the Iraqi government. But there's not a whole lot the Iraqi government could do about it because they can't get ISIS out of their country. And so he's going to have a lot of power and influence, and even more power and influence moving forward. And so I guess the question is going to be like, how stable is he? What is his overall goal on the foreign affairs circuit gonna be? What's he gonna do about Assad, and will he take the Turkish army into war somewhere? Prior to the coup and everything, I believe Turkey had the second largest NATO army in like 500,000 people, and so if he did want to have a say in what was going on in Syria, he certainly has the manpower to do it. Moving on to Libya, where I read a story that they're pretty much openly trading slaves in Libya now, and the big point about this is just how far the country has gone from when it was under Gaddafi. Obviously, Gaddafi wasn't a leader to imitate or revere. However, he was a leader who was able to force a certain set of laws, and that set of laws included no open slave trade in Libya, which we're not seeing anymore. And this is just like I've said before, this is a result of U.S. interventionism into Libya. Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama went into the country because they thought they could make it a better place, and they clearly haven't. And we just need to learn our lesson from this. We need to look and we need to say, oh, we tried to overthrow a dictator and put somebody better in power, and we cannot do it. Too bad. Oh well, I guess we have to go home. I don't think many people will pick up on this, but this is just a story that, it's good to share around, because I think people are like, it's a catchy headline, and it's a very easy way to ease into a conversation with somebody about non-interventionism. In Syria, we have a suicide bombing of a Shia bus convoy that killed 127 people, including 95 children. What we had here was a deal worked out between Assad and the rebels, where there are 4 towns, 2 Sunni towns within Syrian government-held territory and 2 Shia towns within rebel-held territory. Those towns have been under siege for at least 2 years. The people there are suffering. I'm sure they hate it. They want to have some sort of normal life again, where there's not a possibility of being overrun and possibly cleansed from the area. And so a deal's worked out where these towns will evacuate, and then the Shia will go to the government-held area, and the Sunni will go to the rebel-held area. And this will make it at least so that these people are no longer in an active war zone, the civilians. So the deal's kind of implemented in pieces, and the piece that they were working on was where they actually evacuate most of the civilians, including the children. We had a Shia bus convoy leaving the town and headed for a government-held area. And when I guess the bus stopped and the children were going to a van to get some food, a blue car pulled up, and a suicide bomber detonated right there, killing 95 of the children and 127 people in total. It seems from the kind of the death count in the story that I read of what happened that the suicide bomber deliberately targeted the children. Reporting on this has not been clear on who's behind it. It seems most likely that Al-Qaeda would be behind it. This did happen in territory held by Al-Qaeda. The people who were responsible for the security of these buses were al-Sham, who is an Al-Qaeda break-off group, who is a Syrian rebel group. And so, I mean, whatever happened, they're, in a way, they're supposed to be protecting the buses, I guess. Maybe there's nothing they could do. Maybe they were in on the suicide attack themselves. The reporting coming out of the West is almost amazing, kind of leading us to believe that Assad is somehow responsible for it just because the war is going on. It seems clear that Al-Qaeda would be behind the attack. It kind of has their MO on it. Al-Qaeda likes to carry out the kinds of attacks that will get the U.S. more involved in the Middle East, so we, waste more of our blood and coin there. And with Trump, having that heartfelt message and his heartbreaking for the children of Syria that died in the chemical weapons attack, maybe they felt like it would be good to target these children and get the U.S. more involved in the Syrian war. However, I don't think people really care about the children. It's more about if it fits your narrative, and then you're going to use the children to get what you want out of it. Obviously, nobody's benefiting from more war against the Syrian rebels. In fact, the government likes the Syrian rebels, and they give weapons to the Syrian rebels. If we're lucky enough to find out more information about the story, and we just may not be, like the chemical weapons attack in Syria, and like I said at the beginning, I don't know if we'll ever know the truth, and I don't know if we'll ever know the truth now. But it's possible that a U.S.-backed group carried out this attack, and so brutal things going on in Syria. Is a terrible situation. It's a terrible place, and as bad as Assad is, I think that if he ends up taking control, we could see less attacks like this going on, and that may be a better situation for the people in Syria. But again, I don't know. I live in the United States, and so do Trump and the rest of them that are saying the policy that has so much impact on the people of Syria. And if we just mind our own business and let them decide what they want for their country, then, let the consequences be their own and not ours. We have a story that U.S. troops are moving into Somalia for the first time in 24 years. Of course, like every other troop movement, it's a advise and assist role. I'm pretty sure that's what they say to get Americans to tune out and say, oh, well, no, nothing to worry about here. They're just going over there to tell other people what to do. However, U.S. troops always end up in the line of fire. I guess this is just more steps towards the U.S. getting more involved in Somalia. We've increased the amount of air power the military could carry out there and special ops raids. So I guess we could see more U.S. involvement in Syria as we move forward here. Also interesting to note, I believe this is the first time American troops have been in Somalia since President Clinton pulled them out of Somalia after the whole Black Hawk Down incident. So if you're aware of that, that's just interesting. Also, we have the Afghanistan Moab attack. Mother of all bombs is what Moab stands for, and it was dropped in Afghanistan. There's a lot of controversy over how many people were killed in the attack. It doesn't seem like anybody knowing. They're just probably making up numbers. The Indians are saying there was 500 Pakistanis who died in the attack. The U.S. has raised the number from 36 to 92. So who knows? Once again, I mean, apparently they use this bomb to destroy tunnels. So how would you know who's even in those tunnels at that? It seems confusing, and I don't know why we're in Afghanistan anymore, to be quite honest. Where I'm going to wrap up the show for today. If you like the show, go to the show's page, foreignpolicyfocus.libsyn.com. Check out our Facebook group, Foreign Policy Focus. Just search in your Facebook search bar and I'll get you approved to the group. Follow me on Twitter at KYAALE, and go to my website, kylesfilesblog.com, files spelled F-Y-L-E-S. I do a daily news roundup that really does complement the podcast, so if you're interested in the podcast, then check out the website and the daily news roundups there. Alright, so if you're still listening, please just click the share button on the show right now, and then, nag some of your friends or family to listen to it, get them more interested in foreign policy. That way we can change some policy. Thanks, everybody. Bye.